I love it. I think one of the things that always grated me more than anything in managers that I maybe didn't get along with, but one thing that managers do that drives me nuts is when they're always pushing you to the next thing. What I really want is a manager who wants to listen to what you want, because at certain times in my life, I just wanted to do my role really well. I didn't want a promotion. I didn't want to go here. I just wanted to do what I was doing and do it really well. And so they say, instead of how can I move you to X, Y, or Z, they say, what can I get you, or what can I remove that's blocking you to help you do what you really want to do? And so I think it's very important what you just said, is to really listen to those people, as opposed to just saying, oh yeah, I'm help people move up the ladder. It's not about that. It's about meeting people with what they need and then really empowering them. And for me, that was a move to Alaska, among other things. But you know, when you really give people what they need, that's when you build some serious loyalty, some serious dedication, and that ever vague culture term, like that's where it comes from.
Heroes are an inspiring group of people. Every one of them, from the larger-than-life comic book heroes you see on the big silver screen, to everyday heroes that let us live the privileged lives we do. Every hero has a story to tell. From the doctor saving lives at your local hospital, to the war veteran down the street who risked his life for our freedom, to the police officers and the firefighters who risk their safety to ensure ours. Every hero is special and every story worth telling. But there is one class of heroes that I think is often ignored: the entrepreneur, the creator, the producer. The ones who look at the problems in this world and think to themselves, you know what, I can fix that. I can help people. I can make a difference. Then they go out and do exactly that by creating a new product or introducing a new service. Some go on to change the world. Others make a world of difference to their customers. Welcome to The Hero Show. Join us as we pull back the masks on the world's finest heropreneurs and learn the secrets to their powers, their success, and their influence, so you can use those secrets to attract more sales, make more money, and experience more freedom in your business. I'm your host, Richard Matthews, and we are on in 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome back to The Hero Show. My name is Richard Matthews, and today I have the pleasure of having on the line Melissa Moody. Melissa, are you there?
Yes. Hi, Richard. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So glad to have you here. I heard before we got on the recording, you're coming in from Alaska. Is that right?
That is right. I live and work in Anchorage.
Yeah, I think you are officially our first Alaskan guest out of 200 episodes, which is pretty cool.
Well, that's a claim to fame. I'll take it.
Yeah. I mean, we've had people from all over Europe and Africa and the Philippines and whatnot, but no one from Alaska. So I have been dying to get to Alaska. I want to see the big mountains up there and the grizzly bears. My dad and I were just talking this morning over breakfast about the salmon that jump out of the water and the bears catch. And I was like, I don't know if you can see that in the wild in Alaska, but I figure if you're going to see it anywhere, that's the place to do it.
You should. There's some amazing places. One place is called Brooks Camp, and the bears are trained, or they're not trained. The bears have never been exposed to humans as a food source. So you literally walk right past giant grizzly bears and watch them fishing. It's pretty great.
That would be so cool. That's on my bucket list, is to see
Yeah.
the grizzly bears hunting salmon for real.
Hmm. Fly into Brooks Camp. You'll love it.
Yeah. So I can't wait to get to Alaska at some point in our travels. For those of you in my audience who are following us around, we have made it from. We're not in Florida anymore. We're in California. We're visiting family over here, on the West Coast, because it's opened up a little bit for travel. So we got stuck in Florida for like 11 months for the last couple of years during our travels. So what I want to do before we get too far is a brief introduction for Melissa. So you are a market leader who loves creating clarity from chaos. You are the head of marketing and co-founder at Gated, which is an email service I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about, and the launches you guys are doing with that this year. And before I get too far into all of this, what I want to start with is, what is it that you are known for? So basically, what do you do? What's your business, and how do you serve them?
Yeah, well, if we think about what I'm known for today, it probably is focused on Gated. So, Gated is a pretty simple and elegant email solution that essentially challenges any unknown senders to donate to a charity of your choice in order to reach you. Now, there's a lot of email tools out there, but what we're doing is very unique in the sense that um, a lot of other tools make you deal with the mess once it's already in your inbox. But what Gated does is we actually say you shouldn't have to deal with those distractions unless they're worth your time. And so we've created this incredible model. My co-founder, Andy Mowat, he actually built it to solve his own problems. He was a GTM leader who'd sent billions of emails under his teams and had kind of created the email pain, and really also felt the pain of being sold to nonstop. So I came on board as co-founder and head of marketing, and my job has really been to take Gated from an idea into a vision and to start talking with people about what it means to really own our attention and to focus on what really matters in life instead of all the digital distractions that are so overwhelming these days. So I guess that's what I'm known for because that's what I spend all my time today talking about. I have a lot of other components of my personality. I'm a marketer, I'm a mom, and I'm certainly my own dynamic person. But gated is such a special thing that I'm finding a lot of my day is focused on helping people learn about it and helping people really think about how we live in this world of digital distraction.
Yeah, yeah, and I've interacted with Gated a few times because I've got some people that I've gotten those emails in response to things, and it does work, and I have donated to charity in order to talk to people, so it's functional. I've thought about it myself, but I have reservations about it. Maybe we can talk
Mhm.
about some of those things today because it sort of struck me as like I get a lot of emails from people that are like they're actually essential for business, but they wouldn't be in my contact book, and I'm like I don't know what would happen with those. Like for instance, we run a um, e-commerce brand that we get stuff from China and India that we source products and stuff from, like everything from bottle caps to little seals that go on the bottles to we actually have the people who manufacture our candles, and a lot of times those people will like email randomly like, hey, here's your invoice or whatever for and I'm like I'm not sure how you'd make sure which person, like if you could get the whole company's emails to make sure they're going to come through.
Yeah, no, well, that's a great question. So, to begin with, gated really is for people who are getting a lot of inbound email, but they aren't a customer facing or they have a huge like sales component to their role, right? Because if you have a lot of cold email that's trying to reach you, you're right, it's not going to make sense. The people that really love gated, the people that can't stop raving about it, are folks like CMOs, demand gen leaders,
Yeah,
rev
yeah,
ops managers, people where they've got a lot of inbound email, a lot of folks are selling to them, and yet they don't have that immediate, there's not a lot of kind of business critical email that's coming in cold. So that's one point to it. The other kind of component to it is that gated gives a lot of hands-on transparency to what you're doing, so you actually have the ability to train gated to know who you allow and who you don't, and you can even do that by domain. So if you knew certain customer domains were going to be reaching out to you, you could set that to allow them. There's a lot of We have a lot of dials that you can play with when you're a
yeah,
gated user.
because it's interesting because I like looking at my own inbox. I get I don't know 300 or 400 emails a day,
Right.
and maybe two or three of them are useful, like things that I
Right.
actually need to interact with or respond to. Lots of notifications from systems that I don't particularly need those notifications, but I get them anyways. And it's a fascinating problem because you're like I can't turn everything off because I get
Mhm.
stuff that I need, but at the same time,
Well, think about it this way. We used to use very commonly the metaphor of, it's a postage stamp for email. A truck can't drive up with a whole bunch of letters and dump them on your porch and drive away, right?
yeah,
But that's what we're doing every day in email. Every single day, a truckload of other people's things for you is dropped into your inbox, and you're left to deal with it. And so, if you think about implementing this kind of marginal cost, and the donations really are marginal, it's $1, $2 at the kind of the minimum
yeah,
number. It just immediately cuts down on that clutter. We live in a world where all of the tools on the automation front are coming from the marketing side. They can send you more emails, more personalization. They have more data about you to reach you. And yet, there doesn't exist a tool right now to help the buyer side, the person who's getting overwhelmed with all of those marketing and sales and irrelevant emails, to fight back. And so that's a lot of what Gated is doing. We're saying just a little marginal cost allows you to have the power back in your hands again.
that's really cool. And I assume you mentioned like being able to do domains and stuff. So like the
Mhm.
notifications I get for say this podcast when it says, hey, your interview with Melissa's in an hour, like I can make sure those show up.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. So, and I heard before we got into talking about that, you also mentioned you're a mother, and I assume you do have other responsibilities and whatnot. So I wanted to find out a little bit. What's your family life look like outside of working with Gated?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I've been very fortunate over the last years. I have an 8 and a 10-year-old, and before my time with Gated, I was working at Google, and I had some incredible managers who really built a structure that allowed me to have a flexible life, which allows me to balance family with my goals for my professional career. So yeah, I would say the word is balance, right? Or perhaps the word is juggling. There's always something to be taken care of, whether it's on the kid front or on the work front. But I find that that's an important part of my personality, the ability to be more than just a career focused person, but to also have family as a critical part of what I spend my day on.
Yeah, yeah, I'm the same way. I've got 4 kids. I've got two
Great.
5 and 8-year-old girls and a 12-year-old boy with us in
Busy.
our tiny RV and a very large poodle that we take all over the place with us. And he's actually sitting on the floor over here watching me do the interviews because that's what he does. But yeah, my goal in life has always been like, how do I run a business that serves people and provides value while at the same time taking up as little of my time as possible, so I can spend as much of it as possible with them because that's what I really want to be doing.
Well, that's right. It's all about focus. It's all about having the ability to think about your priorities, keep them in mind, and then, kind of divest of all of those other things that are trying to steal your time or steal your attention away from what you already know matters, right?
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting that your business actually is talking specifically to that problem, is helping people focus their lives
Yeah,
on the things that matter to them. So
exactly.
that's very cool. So I want to talk then about your origin story. Right here on this show, we always talk. Every good comic book hero has an origin story. It's the thing that made them into the hero they are today, and we want to hear that story. Essentially, were you born a hero? Were you bit by a radioactive spider that made you get into email marketing, or did you start in a job and eventually become more entrepreneurial? Basically, where did you come from?
That's a great question. I think I've always been fairly entrepreneurial at heart. I was raised in a family that loved talking about business and finance, and but coming out of college, I actually started as an educator. I have my master's in education. I taught
Nice.
students with language-based learning disabilities at the high school level, so it was a really fascinating job. Spent a while doing that. At a certain point, partly because I moved locations across country, but partly because I realized I wanted the challenge of a little bit of a faster pace, the corporate pace. I actually pivoted from education into marketing. And personally, I think that's a really natural pivot. As an educator, you understand that there's a message and there's a customer, and your main goal is to make sure the customer receives your message, right? Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
education and that's marketing. So I made a pivot and I started working at Google in 2007 in Seattle, which actually was a very small crew. It was felt like a small company, even though Google was quite large already at that point. Over almost 14 years at Google, I've accumulated an incredible amount of marketing knowledge, both kind of on the digital side and really focused on performance marketing, but also on kind of understanding industries and markets. So that was quite a lot of years. And then I hit a point at which I realized I am someone who does best when they are being challenged, when they are learning. When I get really good at something, I get bored and I find myself actually physically being more lethargic. And, my friends and husband will tell you that when I am challenged and I'm learning, my energy just skyrockets. I don't need caffeine. I can go all day based on the thrill of the chase. And so frankly, Google got really, really big and I was ready for something new. I'd been mentoring and judging a lot of startup weekends here in my local community. And I realized that what I was craving was some boots on the ground time, not helping entrepreneurs, but actually being an entrepreneur myself. So I was very fortunate. I worked with quite a few startups initially and then found my place at Gated and have been thrilled because it's exactly what I love doing, bringing a product to market and thinking about all the complexity that comes with it. And
So
having to focus and having to prioritize because I'm very good at that.
so how did that get you from Seattle to Alaska?
Oh, great question. I was actually still at Google when we moved up here. We moved up for family reasons. My husband is born and raised up here, and I had an incredible manager. I walked into his office and said, I'm moving to Alaska, so I'll have to quit. And he looked right back at me in the eye and he said, No. And I said, No, I'm quitting. This is me. Goodbye. And he said, Absolutely not. Don't do that. You can do your job, you can do it well, and just do it from somewhere else. Now, this was 6 years, 7 years pre COVID. So I have been working remotely and I've been a very, very passionate champion of remote work for quite a while before the rest of the world fell into the
Yeah,
challenge
was
that is
forced into
remote
it.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I will probably speak for hours just on the benefits of remote work and the future of our kind of global workforce. But
Yeah, it's fascinating because I did the same thing, right? I mentioned before we've been traveling for almost 5 years now,
right.
and I took my business on the road before it was cool to be remote.
Mhm. Yeah.
And our kids have been homeschooled and remote learning that entire time. And when the pandemic hit, the whole first year, we kept getting hit up by friends and family and other people that were like, "How do you do this?"
Right.
So we spent a lot of time just educating our peers on like what we've learned over the couple of years, because it is a different way of working and living.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you get your focus right and your priorities right, you can end up with so much more time because I mean, you can go the other way too, where you have no time, depending on how you actually do that. But you can be very productive in very short amounts of time and move on with your day.
Yeah.
And it's a I think it's a great way to work, and I think it's far more efficient for your business and for our economy and everything.
Absolutely. And I used to say when I was working remotely, but still at a large company when I was with Google, I used to say that when I did travel for work, this was back when we were traveling, um, those travel trips, the work trips that I went on, even the trips themselves were so hyper productive because everything I kind of packed it into the trips. I met with everybody. I was going nonstop. So it just makes all of the ability to focus and get things done packed into the right areas of your life, right? Like the segments of
Yeah.
your life, whether you're off parenting in the morning and then boom, you're into work meetings, or taking a trip and trying to pack things into that. So yeah, I see personally for me, remote work has always been a real benefit in my life and my ability to balance and get things done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely appreciate what you said about it when you're learning
Mhm.
something, when you're being challenged, you get bored once you figure things out. And I had a huge problem with that as I was a younger entrepreneur,
Mhm.
where I would figure something out and then I would be bored with it, so it would fall off of my
Mhm.
priority list and then things wouldn't get done because I was like, it's just not fun anymore.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think it's kind of like in marriage, you have to have your complement, right? You have to have the person on your team who then loves to kind of get things done and just hammer things out, even if, or the things that have to get done no matter what, the consistency pieces. You need to
yeah,
have
yeah.
someone who loves doing that, and then you need to have someone who's always looking for the next thing and the fourth. And I'm not always changing, but I like to be challenged. I like to have my hands in
Yeah.
something that's not a known
My
entity.
solution to that personally was like I really like building systems for things, and that's
Yeah.
challenging and fun for me.
Mhm.
So like what I'll do is when I'm like, okay, here's the thing that we're working on, and I'll figure out the system for it, and I'll just pass the production of that system off to the other people on my team.
Very good.
And then it's like, instead of me just leaving a wake of things that are no longer interesting to me, I'm leaving a wake of like systems that things are getting done behind me, which is far more efficient.
Absolutely. That's great. I love it.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit then about your superpowers that you developed over your career, right? So every iconic hero has a superpower, whether that's a fancy flying suit made by their genius intellect or the ability to call down thunder from the sky. In the real world, heroes have what I call a zone of genius, which is
Mhm.
either a skill or a set of skills that you were born with or you developed over your career. And it's really what sets you apart, right? It's, what allows you to help your people slay their villains and come out on top in their journeys. The way I like to frame this for my guests is, if you look at all the skills that you've developed, there's probably between all those skills a common thread that sort of ties them all together. And that
Mhm.
common thread is probably where your superpower is. So, with that framing, what do you think your superpower is?
It's funny because it actually does reflect what we were talking about with gated, but I've had people share with me. I actually did a really interesting exercise on this. Louis Grenier, he has a great company called Everybody Hates Marketers, but he has a really good activity around this, which says you basically email 10 to 20 close people and you ask them, what is my unique ability? And I did that a couple months ago. So I think it comes into play here. But
Yeah.
for me, what really ended up standing out very clearly is I've always been very good at being able to look at a complex mess and come out of it with clarity, right? So to take a mess and to really put things into order and also decide what belongs and what doesn't. So both the prioritization that we already talked about, but also the creating structure out of complexity, and creating a focus out of something that originally looks messy. I think that's probably the talent of mine that shows up in a lot of different areas. I mean, it can manifest
Yeah.
in very
Yeah.
different scenarios, but it often comes up that that's where my natural skill strength lies.
Yeah, it's one of I don't exactly know how to say this properly, but it's one of those like really deep skills that's like it's like close to the universe, if that makes sense. Because if you look, everything in our whole world is duality, right? You got
Mhm.
male and female and yin and yang and all those things, and you got order and chaos.
Yeah.
And the natural world and the human world and all those things are all they're all sort of that duality. And everything in our world comes down to some sort of duality. And one of the things that I think is fascinating about people in general is our ability to go into the chaos and then create order. That's what like our civilization is. And that's why we like things like, gardens and other things, because we're making the chaotic world into, like, we shape it the way that we want it to be. And so to have that as like a skill, where you can, things where you can basically go into something that's chaotic and then bring the order to it, I think is one of those. It's a very high level skill, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It also is funny because it sometimes also, it ties into what I think is personally one of my failings, which is, I'm a very loving, caring person, but I also can be I'm very pragmatic. I think that when it comes down, I'm extremely pragmatic. So I have the ability to go into chaos and not be overwhelmed by it. I think a lot of
Yeah.
people go into chaos and it's just so emotional. And I go in there, I'm like, huh, this is a mess. Let's,
You're like,
how
"Yeah,
are we going
look,
to address?
chaos. Where do we
Yeah.
start?"
And then when it gets to the details, people be like, "Oh, I can't let go of that one thing. It's really important." I'm like, "No, it's not part of the plan. We're out of here." So I have a very innate pragmatism, I think, that helps me do that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting. You mentioned the exercise you went through. I actually had one of my business mastermind partners had us go through that a couple of years ago. And I don't remember if it was from the same person or not, but she was basically had us go through all of our, people that have known us in a professional setting and ask the same question, like,
Mhm.
essentially, what's your superpower or what's your unique ability? And I remember going through that, and I sat down with one of my best friends for like 4 or 5 hours, and we just went over responses for each other's stuff. And that's where like my sort of love of systems and everything came out for me, right? And I realized that like I don't see the world like a normal person. Like normal people like see things, and I don't see things. I see like the stuff behind the things.
Yeah.
Like it drives my wife nuts to watch a movie with me because like I don't see just the movie. I see the movie and the training the actors went through, and I see like I count the lights in all the scenes.
Yeah.
And she's like, "You can't see the lights." I was like, "I can see the lights because I've been a professional photographer for a long time. So like I see the lighting in the scene, and I'm like, oh look, they used square catch lights instead of round ones for that scene. I wonder why the cinematic director chose that." And like because that's the way I see things. Like I see all the systems behind it, and that's it wasn't until I really like honed in on that I was able to start focusing my business that direction.
Yeah.
And I mentioned earlier, like figuring out like, hey, the problem in my business was I wasn't actually focusing on like, hey, how about I just take the problems that I'm solving and the things that like, the things that make me happy is like solving a problem and having a challenge. And then like, well, how about I build a system around that challenge and that be part of my own system for dealing with my own crazy, right?
Yeah.
um,
I mean,
and
it's so important to recognize that about yourself because then you can find what works. I mean, I think that's why I'm finding now I'm addicted to the startup world because it's all complexity and
yeah,
it all needs someone to say, here's where we're going to focus. This is what we're going to do.
I need someone who can make order out of it.
Yeah. And I was kind of for the last few years, I was sitting at a company where all the order was in place. Everything was where it needed to be. And for someone like me, that gets a little boring.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's the one of the reasons why I passionately love traveling. It's
Yeah.
because I'm the same way, right? Like
Agree.
it, the first like 3 or 4 months or so of traveling, it was like, holy crap, what have I done to myself and my family? Because we're, like everything about your life, you've tossed out the window, and everything from like where your toilet paper is stored to how you flush the toilet, all of it's changed.
Yeah.
But yeah, you get to a point now where we're 4.5 years into traveling full time. Like, I don't know where I'm going to be in 3 weeks, which drives people nuts. But
Yeah.
it's like my wife and I are totally cool with that. It's our favorite part of the whole thing is that like we could go anywhere and do whatever we want.
So cool.
So
I'm
yeah,
so inspired right now.
you get a lot of joy out of that chaos. And it's funny because we have friends that are like, I don't know how you do that. Because they like to have things in order all the time. And when you have a lifestyle like ours, it's never all in order. You have like your things that are in order, right? Like we've got our house and our car and our finances and all that stuff is in order, but like our plan is never in order.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Exactly.
similar kind of thing. So I want to dive a little bit into the flip side. You mentioned the other side of the superpower, and we
Mhm.
always talk about that as the fatal flaw, right?
Yeah.
And just like every Superman has their kryptonite, or Wonder Woman can't remove her bracelets of victory without going mad, you probably have a flaw that's held you back, something that you struggled with. For me, I struggled with a couple of things. I mentioned one of them already was my ability to just let chaos, behind me. But also, I struggled with perfectionism. Right, that whole love of systems means that I'm always like, I could tweak it, make it better, and then
Mhm.
never ship anything, because you could always make another tweak before you bring it to customers if you wanted to. Um, or I had a problem with lack of self-care, which generally brought itself out in like not having good boundaries with my clients,
Yeah.
or not having good boundaries with my time. And I'd spend 18 hours working and then not sleep, and then do that 3 days in a row and then be sick. Right. So like learning how to actually build a good self-care routine and things like that. So I
Mhm.
think more important than what the flaw was is how have you worked to overcome it so you can continue to grow and continue to make your business better. And hopefully sharing your experience will help our audience learn a little from you.
Yeah, I think I kind of fell into that with the last answer, but I'll build on it a little bit. Like I mentioned, I tend to be extremely pragmatic. So I'm not, I mean, again, I'm extremely loving. Like I'm a mother, I'm a good friend, I have all this, but I'm not, I've never really been an over emotional person. And so I cry at movies, to be fair. Um, but, I find that often there's an element of,
You're not sentimental.
yeah, yeah, when you jump in, like, I'll love to hop on a call and say, "Hey, how's everybody doing?" And then a minute later, I'm ready to move. We're gonna move into a project, we're gonna start working on it, we're gonna hack out some details. Um, I have really worked over the last years to build up, you know, the things that more round out my emotional, intelligence.
Mhm.
I'm not saying I ignore those things about people, but for me, I'm always really moving on to business. I mean, I am someone who likes to get stuff done and I move fast and sometimes I steamroll. And, that can be definitely felt in my personal life with my husband and definitely in work. If I'm not careful, it can seep through as well. And so I think it's just very important to, A, be aware of that and to consciously do things to push the other side of your personality.
Yeah.
So I love doing really interesting icebreakers. I love doing, I actually got some uh, training when I was at Google. I'm a certified sprint master. So I like to facilitate sprints. There's a lot more open thinking in sprints, a lot less we're going to drive to the answer and a lot more open thinking. And I found that that really enhanced my ability at work to think in a different way, right? To think
Yeah.
in what we call a divergent way as opposed to convergent way. I often am converging, find the answer, drive to focus, as opposed to stepping back and saying, let's just throw some stuff out. Let's talk. So that's one thing is that I actually built in some skills into my work life. The other thing I will say is just surround yourself with good people. I build very deep, strong relationships so that when there are people that love me, even in the work scenario, then they can say, "Hey, you need to slow down. We need to give some more time to X, Y, or Z." That I can listen to that
Yeah.
and take
Yeah.
it. So having people who balance out your fatal flaw, I mean, has to always be one of the best answers, right? Like some people who can point to it and say, "You need to stop doing that. You know
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
doing it."
I have what I call my business running partner. He's one of my best friends. We've been running businesses separately but together, right? Like at the same time for,
Cool.
more than a decade now. And he's similar. He can steamroll people,
Yeah.
um, which he's aware of, but he
Mhm.
can't really steamroll me,
Right.
which has always been really useful because he'll like bring things to me, and like I guess I'm just like a big rock, and he just steamroller runs into it, and he's like, oh wait, I guess I should you know think about it a little bit more. So it's always nice to have someone who can handle that.
I
um,
was in one of the things I really appreciate about my time at Google is I was able for a while after having my second child, I took part in a job share, and so I worked with this amazing woman in a job share, and I call her my better half, and she calls me her better half. But the way I saw it was I had kind of this CEO personality of like, there's an idea, we're gonna go do it, let's do this, boom. She was kind of my COO. She was always the one who's saying, let's think about this logically, you know, whoa, 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 back up. Let's not just run forward. And so I think finding people like that who complement your skill set, not just to stop you when you're going
yeah.
rolling or getting lost in the data systems, but to complement your
Yeah.
natural abilities.
And you mentioned having kids, and one of the things that I've noticed about both him and I, because we started together before either of us had kids, and now he's got 5 kids and I got 4 of them.
Wow.
And one of the things I noticed is having children really forces you to deal with your weaknesses in that area.
Oh
Like,
yes.
because I don't know how to put this other than your kids don't take any shit.
No,
Like,
and sometimes even better, sometimes they have the exact flaw and you look at them and then you realize,
you're like,
"Oh,
oh,
oh
that's
yeah. Mhm.
you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I see what I've done there, and then you call your parents up and you're like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and they say, "Yeah, your punishment is that you get to raise you. Go ahead."
You're like, enjoy, thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've got a toddler right now who is I don't know how she's like
Challenging.
a yeah, challenging, that's a good way to put it. She is got 2 modes. One of them is 100% angel, like, from heaven. She is just the coolest kid you've ever met. And then with the flip of a switch, she is just a demon straight out of hell. And I'm like,
Mhm.
I don't know how this, like, I'm pretty sure, like, I'm starting to get gray hair. It's all from her. Um,
I think they're designed to do that. Some toddlers do it more than others.
yeah, I had 3 that didn't, but I've got one, like, I had 3 kids that, like, my friends were like, you didn't have toddlers. Um,
Look what
and
we did for you.
and then I had this one that I'm pretty sure packed all 4 of the terrible twos into one child.
Yeah. Is her
So
middle name Payback?
yeah. That's where I think we're at. Yeah, she had a meltdown this morning because her sock wouldn't go on her foot right, and it
Right.
was like
Yeah.
20 minutes of screaming. And I
You
tried to help her,
know
and she got mad at me for helping her and was like, "Don't help me. I want to do it myself." And then she just continued to have a meltdown over her sock. And I went to her mom, and I was like, "I don't know how to help her. She's
yeah,
freaking the f out over her sock."
totally. I did an exercise one time, and they talked about both adult humans and young humans. There's a spectrum of sensitivity, and I'd never thought about that before. But some people are highly sensitive, and some people are very low sensitivity. And so,
Yeah,
actually, often those kids with trouble with socks or tags, um, physical sensitivity often relates directly to your emotional sensitivity. So
yeah,
sometimes that the ability to be super high and then super low. Um, that comes out. Now, it's not a bad thing. It's definitely not a bad thing. I think, to my point about being pragmatic, I'm very low sensibility, which is also not a bad thing. But we all fall somewhere on the spectrum. And it's kind of neat to think about that and to say, okay,
yeah.
this is just a sensitive person.
I
And
always I always try to look at them and see how does this behavior turn into genius later.
absolutely. And being very aware of things, both physical and emotionally, will be a wonderful skill set for her in the future.
Yeah, yeah. So, and it's fun watching them grow up and see all the things that they are capable of and what they're doing. But yeah, just to the point, it definitely has helped me see my own fatal flaws and forced me
Mm,
to work on them,
yeah,
because you realize as a parent, they're not going to make you better. You
right.
have to make yourself better for them.
Exactly.
Um, so it's a very good mirror, I guess, if that makes sense.
It is. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, what I want to talk about next then is your common enemy. And in this, I want to bring directly
Mm,
back to the discussion about your clients in the gated community, right?
yeah.
So, which it's actually fun, gated community.
Well, I have to
um,
work.
so, every superhero has their arch nemesis, right? It's the thing that they fight against in their world. And in the world of business, it takes a lot of forms, but we like to put it in the context of your clients, right? Your customers at your business. And it's a mindset or it's a flaw that you are constantly have to
Mhm.
fight against to overcome so they can actually get the results that they came to you for,
Yeah.
right? And so, in your business, with what you guys do with Gated, what is the thing that either when you're marketing or with your sales that you guys are constantly fighting against to help grow that company?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've got one, and I think everybody knows it. Everybody has felt this villain or the arch enemy. It is digital overwhelm. It is the fact that we live in a world where 390 billion emails a day are being sent. Um,
390 billion?
that is correct. And
Wow.
that's not even accounting for Slack and iMessage and Instagram and TikTok and WhatsApp. I mean, you can't. I mean, it's like the
That's like
beginning of.
hundreds and hundreds of messages per person on the planet a day.
Right, that's exactly right, and I think the key words there are per person. What we've done is we've moved over the last, 7 to 5 years, I think there have been two major shifts that we've seen. The first is an increase in automation, right? It is no longer person to person. Back when we had email, when it first arrived, you've got mail. Somebody was reaching out to you and you were having a
Mhm.
conversation. We don't live in that world anymore. I think there's a stated fact that it's upwards of 90% of all the email sent is not from people, right?
Yeah.
So automation, especially on the marketing automation side, where there are so many tools for marketers and sellers to use to automate reaching out via email to people. Um, it's massively amplified this trend of digital noise, specifically in email, but you can extend that to anything, to all the other platforms. And then the second thing is another big trend we've seen is from a more business standpoint is the trend of product led growth, where people used to sell a tool to the executive suite, right, to the CEO or the CTO. Right
Mhm.
now we live in a world where there's not only more digital tools, but they can now sell to many more people. So anyone from mid to senior level is being sold tools like Loom and Calendly and Zoom. I mean, the list goes on and on and
Yeah,
on.
or Zencaster that we're on now.
There you go, Zencaster. I mean, there's just and they're wonderful tools, but not only are we using the technology to send more email, but there's more solutions that are being sold on a daily basis to more of us. So it's just this snowball of digital noise. And I think that whether gated existed or not, that arch nemesis is present for every single one of us. And it can apply to trying to get our work done or trying to live our lives in a way that matters. We spend so much of our time and energy just trying to cut through that noise. And that's fundamentally what Gated was built for. I mean, we have a manifesto on our website, and it all starts with take back control of your attention. Right now, you're not in charge of all of the information that's flowing in. And it's time that we all realize that we can have tools and solutions that help us actually not be just victims in that situation.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting because it you mentioned like the marketing automation and all the tools to reach out and like all those things. They're all growing and they're getting bigger and more notifications and more marketing automation, and that's happening because like it's effective, right? Like they work
It is and
for.
it isn't. I mean, if you talk, so some of our biggest advocates at Gated are the folks who are sellers and email senders. Because what's happening now is email deliverability rates are dropping. I mean, they're below 2%, 1%. You could send out 100 emails and hear back from one. So is that really effective? No, it's a spray and pray strategy, right? Like send more emails, you'll get more volume and hits. What Gated envisions is that instead of sending 100 and getting one reply, you should be able to send 10 and get six. We're seeing when somebody makes a donation to reach a gated user, the reply rate's around 50, 60%. So instead of sending a bulk of volume just to get a little bit back, why not send better, actual human to human communication that also does benefit for nonprofits and actually hear back? The senders and the sellers are some of the biggest advocates for what we're doing, and that's why.
So out of on the flip side, because you mentioned senders, now gated is generally targeted toward the one who is receiving emails.
Right.
How do you guys, or do you guys work with senders at all?
So to We are built as a tool for the user of email. So we are really focused on solving that problem for the individual who uses email, wants to cut through the noise, is excited about benefiting nonprofits. Um, but what we've seen is simply by implementing that marginal cost and the outcomes that it creates, it has created value for the senders as well. So technically, we are entirely focused on the users. I do think in the future there will be room to um, continue developing a product in a way that benefits everyone, but we are committed to being a user first product.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And I think it's a good drive into my other question, which is your driving force, right? So the flip side of your common
Mm,
enemy. If your common enemy is what you fight against, your driving force is what you fight for.
yeah,
Right. So just like Spider-Man fights to save New York or Batman fights to save Gotham, or you worked for Google, they work to index and categorize all the world's information.
make it useful. Yep.
Yeah, make it useful, right? We want to know what it is that you fight for at Gated and, essentially why you do that.
I have had such joy in this role in realizing that what Gated exists to do is to basically unleash the potential of all of the amazing other people in the world. So by that I mean when we have a user who has never used gated and then they start using it and they see what it can do, how it can free up their focus, how it can enable them to do the things they're doing better, or on a bigger scale or for the right reasons, it's super refreshing. I talked to an amazing female CMO the other day, and she and I were going on about how her external image of herself, a focused, organized achiever, right? Very highly successful CMO. She said when she looked at her inbox, it didn't feel like her. It felt like it was chaotic and unstructured and didn't reflect who she is. And what Gated does is it, by getting rid of the clutter and by letting people focus on the messages that matter and the things that matter, they can then better do their job. So a lot of, as head of marketing, a lot of the content that I'm building and sharing with Gated is, look at these amazing people and what they can do because they have the tools to allow them to do that. And that's what really fundamentally I hope that gated can serve a role as, is not gated and gated for itself, but gated because it lifts up other incredible people and enables them to do more in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like that thought too. That when you look at your email inbox, it doesn't feel like you. Because I get that. I don't like my email inbox. I only
Yeah.
go there when I have to, and I tell people regularly. I'm like, they're like, "How should I reach out to you?" I'm like, become friends with me on Facebook and reach out to me on Facebook Messenger, or here's my phone number, text me, that kind of thing.
Right.
And like we moved all of I've got two companies that we run, and we moved both of them off of email communication into we're using a competitor to Slack called Twist.
Hmm.
But it's a similar kind of real time communication thing because email is just it's difficult. It hurts. Like it's not a
And
right.
it shouldn't.
Yeah, it shouldn't. It's not. It's a great way to lose things in the clutter.
Right.
Um, and it's interesting that you guys are working to solve that, because it's like you would think that in 2022 all these other ways of communicating something would have taken over, but email is still like foundational for the internet almost, where everywhere you go, if you want to sign up for Slack or Twist or Facebook or any of the instant messenger stuff, the first thing they're asking you for, what's your email?
Well, that's another interesting thing that I've seen come up, which is people still think their emails are secret and private.
Yeah.
And they're not. If you talk to any kind of major email marketing exec, I mean, there are so many tools to scrape and find people's emails. And so if your email is out there in public and searchable and scrapable, you're just going to be a target for all of the email that comes in. We were laughing. Eli Manning's email got leaked the other day. I don't know if you saw the news about that,
I
but I was
didn't.
like, this is why Eli needs gated, right? Like our email is not really a hidden thing anymore, but that doesn't mean that the inbox itself shouldn't still be yours, right? And what gated does is kind of provide that. Um, you know, let's take our brand name, gated. You could see it as this closed door, locked door, but that's not what we're about. What we're about is that feeling when someone opens their gate and you get to come into their personal space, which you know matters to them. That means something. That's real connection. And so this idea that you should be allowed to kind of say, I'm going to let things in when they matter to me, but the rest of this digital noise doesn't have a place in my life. It does nothing but distract and take away from the great things I can achieve.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah,
It reminds me of the during the pandemic. I mentioned we got stuck for 11 months. We got stuck in a gated community,
yeah,
which is, I mean, we got stuck in paradise. It was heaven. But the thing that we had all of the chaos that was sort of happening,
yeah,
and riots and other bad things that were going on. And one of the things that was really interesting to me about being in a gated community is it felt very safe.
interesting.
Right, it felt like a safe place, and, like, you could still have guests come over and other things, and, you could order pizza, and you just had to call up to the gate and be like, "Hey, pizza guy's coming, he'll be here in 20 minutes," and the gate person would know to let them in, right? They're being allowed into your space.
Yeah. Yeah,
And I don't know, that
what
sort
we
of
don't want what we don't want is any of the idea that, like, you're keeping people out. And I think that's what a lot of past email solutions have done is they have locked down the inbox and said no senders can come in, right? You can't come in. This is only Richard's spot. Nobody else is allowed. And we're definitely not taking that track because we believe fundamentally in the value of communication. There can be very useful cold email. So the way that Gated is built is, it's a minimal donation. It's not $50 to reach Richard. Although, if Elon Musk wants to put gated on his email, he might want to have a slightly higher price, and benefit his nonprofit, right? Um, So, I think it's very important, and that is the challenge here, is to remind people that the idea is that the gate can be open. It's just that you need to be providing value to Richard if you want to reach Richard. You can't just dump stuff. Um, so,
Yeah, yeah, and it's really fascinating too to think about like, hey, what is an amount that gets my attention,
right.
right?
Yeah,
That I'm like, hey, if you're willing to donate this to my nonprofit, I'm willing to take time out of my day to speak to you.
exactly.
um,
Exactly. We're
yeah,
seeing a lot of really interesting user differences between users because people are all such individuals. Some people want to keep the donation low and don't mind having a few things come in, and then other people really value the quiet that gated creates, and so they actually put a higher donation. It'll be very
so
interesting to see as we go
just
forward.
just out of curiosity, do you guys have any way of tracking or seeing, um, just for instance, there is the more divisive things that people can donate to, right?
Mhm.
Just, off the top of my head, you could say things like, hey, you could reach me if you want to donate to Planned Parenthood or whatever the antithesis of Planned Parenthood is. Those are
Yep.
the kind of things that like someone might not want to reach out to you if their donation is going to something they don't agree with. Have you guys seen anything like that or have problems with things like that?
Yeah, we're thinking very carefully about our nonprofit strategy. We're partnering with a couple of really wonderful thought leaders in the nonprofit space to shape what the future is about the nonprofit side of the business. I will say that the solution we are creating, as I mentioned before, is very, very user centric. So right now, we are allowing any individual to pick to donate to any 501c3 that is GuideStar certified. So if you can find it in GuideStar and it is a licensed 501c3, you can donate to that.
So
We
does
don't.
does the end user who's making the dollar donation, do they know who the user is donating to?
Yes, that's exactly right. So when they get a challenge email, it'll say to reach Richard, donate to his chosen nonprofit, Big Brothers Big Sisters, right? So they will see that. We have had some interest on the sender side of wanting to pick their own one to donate to. But fundamentally, if you think about it this way, if you think about that the sender is trying to reach you, let's say they're trying to take you out to dinner to get your business, right? And you say, I really like, I don't know, Chili's. And they say, great, we're going to Taco Bell. You're like, okay, well, you're trying to connect with me. Or even more important, let's say you sit down and they're trying to buy you a drink and you say, I like IPAs. And they say, I bought you a martini. Like, it's not actually making a connection if they're not thinking about you and what you'd like.
Yeah.
So, we have a long evolution to go on how we structure that. But right now, we find it's important to give that choice to the user, and
Yeah,
let
yeah.
them say what's important to them. Because ideally, if the sender really wants to connect with them, at the very least, it gives them a good talking point, right?
Yeah, yeah. Because I was thinking like things like Planned Parenthood or the NRA can be
Mhm.
divisive, right?
Mhm.
Where like someone who might be like, I don't know if I want to talk to Richard that bad. I don't want to donate a dollar to the NRA.
Yeah. Well, and as Richard, probably know that if you put it on there, you might get that desired. So really, it becomes it's your inbox. We're going to give you that choice. I think it'll be interesting to see how we evolve because there's so many nonprofits. So we're going to think about how,
Yeah.
from a
My
numbers
my
standpoint.
favorite nonprofit is Vitamin Angels. And we
Oh,
actually we have I have a supplement company that we ran for a number of years, and we ran a promotion called Buy a Bottle, Save a Life.
oh, cool.
Um, and which we ran the entire time we had the company, but essentially they provide vitamin A to children all over the world.
Oh, cool.
And vitamin A is the number one killer of children under a certain age, because the vitamin A deficiency is what basically activates your gut immune system, and if you have
Yeah.
a deficiency in it, kids die from things like diarrhea and common colds.
Yeah.
So it's the number one killer is vitamin A deficiency, and it costs approximately 25 cents a year to to give a child enough vitamin A to survive. So we did every bottle of supplements we sold, we donated a quarter to Vitamin Angels. And
That's so critical. And here's what's really interesting I've learned about the nonprofit side of Gated was at first, um, I was saying, well, the donation amounts aren't that much. It's kind of like when you round up at the grocery store or you round up at the bank, there is small dollar donations. And a lot of the nonprofits that I've worked with, one comes to mind is called the Headstrong Project. They do mental health for veterans. It's a really amazing, growing charity. That's the one that I currently support with my Gated account. But the CMO there, she said to me, it's not so much the donation amount, because if somebody wants to donate to Vitamin Angels, they can go and write a check, right? But one thing that Gated does is it's the awareness. Everyone that then would email you would see they learn about this incredible nonprofit, which I've never heard about, and now I'm gonna go look up more of. So it's brand awareness, really. You're putting the
Yeah.
brand out there, and then it's telling them something about you. So they know that this has a connection to you and they may want to hear more about it. So it's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
so much the dollars, it's like a personal alignment, and then it's also just brand awareness. The email,
So
the amount of emails sent
have you
out.
guys considered working with the nonprofits
Yeah.
on the messaging for
Mhm.
how those donations make an impact? Like for instance, with Vitamin Angels, they had on their website that like 25 cents is enough to save a child's life, right? And so like every 25 cents generated is a thing. So like that it was good messaging for us to say buy a bottle, save a life kind of thing. And it'd be really interesting if you guys were actively as marketers teaching these nonprofits how to say, hey, when you donate $1 to to Richard to reach him, that's going to get XYZ result from the nonprofit.
I love that. You're speaking my marketer's language, right? Like instead of saying donate $1, it's donate a
It's
dollar
save
to
save four
to
kids.
supply 4 children with vitamin A. It's
Yeah,
very tangible. It's like when you buy a sheep instead of donating $25 to, that kind of thing. Yeah, absolutely. I think we have a long and very exciting road ahead of us with how we partner with nonprofits.
yeah,
And
that's fascinating to me. It's one of the things that I would, one of these days, if I ever get extra time, getting in and just like helping nonprofits figure out how to speak that way,
yes,
I think would drastically help change the world because you see I think there is going to be more and more and more on the marketing side from big companies where they realize they have to have some sort of a mission driven stuff for selling. And it's one of the things that we noticed when we switched our marketing from like, hey, buy our supplements because they're the best, to hey, buy a bottle, save a life. We like tripled our sales,
well,
right?
and it's
And
important that that's not the driving factor, right? Like no
yeah,
one should ever be using a nonprofit to create the more sales. But when you have a model, as you just did, which is based on the business itself, but it then goes to benefit, to have that social good component, that's
yeah, we're
extremely
part of it.
powerful. Yeah, and that's why Gated, I found from the beginning, was so excited, was because we're not using nonprofits to get more users at all. We're just saying use the product, and then by using the product, wow, you have a
Yeah,
benefit for
right.
the
It's the
nonprofit.
same thing. Like, hey, when you buy a pair of shoes from Zappos, we're going to send a pair of shoes to a kid who needs them, right?
Right.
It's that kind of um, like mission driven sort of capitalism
Yep.
that I think is going to get bigger and stronger. And I think you guys are well situated to help that growth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which,
I also hope to kind of help companies find that going forward. I think the work we're doing right now as Gated is so important, but I do look forward to the day when I can kind of spread that wealth and help people understand how to do that in a way that's really, you know, um, focused on doing it right for the business and your customers, and then seeing what springs out of it that could benefit the world.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I like I don't know. I was just thinking about it. There's so many things you could drive into that messaging, like, hey, donate to this cause. That as a user, to be able to talk to the people who are trying to reach out to me about like, hey, if you want to reach out to me, I want you to donate to this cause. Here's why. Like, here's what it means to me. Right.
Yeah.
Here's I have a supplement company that works with here. Here's why we do it. Here's all those things. Like, it's part of my story.
Yeah, you might even see, there's a long road to go, but you might see the day where you can even record a little video and it's in that challenge email. It says, "Hey, I'm Richard. I'm really excited to talk to you, and let me know why. Here's why." Da, da, da. You could
Yeah.
really make more appealing and help people understand why that barrier is there. That you really value your time and your attention, and you're ready to talk with anybody as long as they value you back.
Yeah, and it's cool because it's not like they're putting money in my bank account. That's not the point. We're doing some good here.
Yeah, exactly. That
That's
should be my
cool.
tagline on a t-shirt. We're doing some good here.
We're doing some good here. Yeah, I mean it's true. That's what you guys are doing, right? You're doing my one of my favorite things. I've worked with a lot of real estate trainers in the course of my career, and one of the
Mm,
things that was really um, driven into my head with people who are doing real estate investing as a transaction, like as a transactional thing, is where the value is, right? Because it has to be a win-win-win for everyone involved, right? It's always a
mhm.
three-way win. It's
Yeah,
the person who's selling their property, the person who's buying the property, and the investor that's in the middle. It's got to win for everyone, or it doesn't work. The deals will never go through.
yeah.
And every investor that I've ever worked with has always had that mentality that it's always got to be a win-win-win deal. And I think thinking about what you're talking about there is you have the sender and the user and the third
Mhm.
party nonprofit, right? Where it's not just a win-win, it's a win-win-win, right? And
Yeah,
there's always that
that's
third party you have to think about.
that's exactly it. I always talk about it as 3 points of value, and that's exactly right. I like win, win, win. I'm gonna keep that going.
Yeah, win-win-win. Cool. So I want to talk a little bit about some practical things, right? And this is interesting because you guys actually might fit into this category as a company. But we talk about the hero's tool belt, right? And every superhero has their tool belt with awesome gadgets like batarangs or web slingers or laser eyes or big magical hammers, right? We want to talk about top one or two tools that you couldn't live without in your business. Could be anything from your notepad to your calendar to your marketing tools, something you use for your own product delivery, something you think
Mm.
is essential to getting your job done over at Gated every day.
I'm gonna throw 2 out, and they're very, very different. I will say, at Google, we used to have a phrase called eating our dog food." You've probably heard that before, like, eat your own
Yeah,
dog food. Over 14 years, I am deeply a user of Google tools. I will say, like, the whole suite of Gmail, Calendar, all those integrations, even into, some of the Google Analytics, the way that it works together, I still find extremely valuable. So I am
yeah.
still a very avid Google product user. I mean, Google Docs and Sheets and all that. So,
If I could just if you can convince someone over there to stop changing the name every 6 months.
ugh, yeah, I don't think that's happening. But yes, that's like the part of the fun of Google is like, who knows what's happening in 18 months, or 12 months or 9 months. In all candor, like I'm still kind of, if I didn't have Google, like train would come off the rails kind of thing. So I'll say that. One of the other ones that I think has been new to me as a startup marketer, as someone who's on the ground trying to get things done, let's be honest, on the cheap and scrappy and without a huge team. um, I've actually found a lot of joy in Canva. Canva has done really incredible things that allow a single marketer to create content and create assets at a scale that previously took so much work. I mean, taking the graphic design components and making them so
Yeah,
much standardized and usable. Canva really has done a lot for me at this kind of ground level startup marketing. Now, one of my advisors is a creative director, and sometimes he gives me the like, oh, we're beyond Canva. But at the same time, it's so freaking useful, and their design and the product itself works beautifully. So,
it's
yeah,
one of those products that like you're like it may not be the most flexible or the best, but that gets you to the end result so fast and so well
yeah.
that it almost doesn't matter you can't do what you could do with Photoshop.
Yeah, and they're not falling down on the job either. There are a couple smaller tools that I use where sometimes I'm like, ugh, and you hit that clunky moment where it's just not working. I don't have those moments often or at all with Canva. I find that if I want to do something, it's usually doable and there and fairly
Yeah.
quite well designed.
Yeah, yeah,
Plus,
it's one of those.
Canva is very social impact minded as a company, which is always nice.
Yeah, it's one of the things that struck me about sort of watching that company grow because I'm probably one of the earliest Canva users when they came out, and I'm like certified in Photoshop from back in high school 20 years ago,
Right.
on like Photoshop version 2 or 3. Like I have an actual paper certificate from high school because I went to training on it way back in the day when websites looked like bubbles and you
Yeah.
could design websites in Photoshop and watching Photoshop become the gigantic bloated mess that it is, right? And it's got more tools than you can name,
It's very
and
complex.
yeah, it's
Hmm.
very complex, and it can literally do anything. Like people in Hollywood edit, Hollywood movies on it, right? Like that's kind of thing. Like they edit the frame by frame kind of stuff. You can do whatever you want with it. But what Canva has done brilliantly is they're like, what's the end result that marketers are looking for, and only showing those tools
Yeah.
and like context specific, like just brilliantly done, I think.
Brilliantly done. Yeah. And the price point and the flexibility of, letting teams work in it is just marvelous.
Yeah, yeah, and they have theirs is a it's a freemium model as well, where like
Mhm.
which is an interesting model that I to this day don't quite understand how people grow their companies that way, but at the same time, like it works, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't think because I've never used it until we started getting a team. We always use it for free until we had a team of people who are using it.
Yeah. I bet.
So
Yeah, there's it's interesting because we've definitely looked at Canva. So gated is free for users. It's free for all users. And I think that that model of freemium means that you also have to think very concretely about how you build your marketing and sales teams going forward, because so much of the heavy lifting is on converting those free users into paid users over time.
yeah. How do you guys work from a payment model on gated?
Yeah, so we believe that everyone should be able to have gated, should have access to gated. So the way that we do it is we actually monetize the sender payments. So just like if you made a donation to Wounded Warrior, a percentage would go to the operation of Wounded Warrior as an organization. Um, the what we do with gated is if someone pays a dollar to reach you, a portion of that will go to support gated. We have, I believe, stated right now it's we take a maximum of 30%. I think what we've done is we've created a structured system where if you make a bigger donation, we take less. So we've scaled it to maximize the benefit to the nonprofits. But that little bit that comes to gated then allows gated to be free for everyone. So
So do you guys have any sort of paid model, or is it just the just that one monetization model?
we do not have a paid model right now. It is gated is free for any user. I mean, we're still on a wait list right now. We're hoping to be sharing it publicly with everyone soon, but it will be free for everyone. That's the model.
So just out of curiosity, how are you guys anticipating the scale once you remove the wait list?
Great question.
You think it's gonna go well? Are you guys
I
ready
mean, I
for
would
it?
love it to go well. We've got a brilliant head of engineering who's building an incredible solution with an eye for scale. Um, I would love to see. Well, if we started small, I'd love to see every overwhelmed marketer and every busy executive using Gated because I know it will bring them value. Down the road, I mean, we do want to fix email for everyone. And I think that by tipping the scales in favor of a marginal cost on email, I think that we can actually fix email for everyone. And that's definitely our vision. So
So here's just another question for you that I know pops up for people who think like I do. Is
hit me.
for a service like Gated,
Mhm.
how difficult is for someone to see your success and then build competitors?
Absolutely. I mean, we believe that we're doing something incredible, and so I don't think the world will ever have a lack of competitors for any interesting idea. I look forward to seeing what that is in the future. There are a lot of email management solutions out there right now. There are a lot of solutions that you and I could have used before Gated. I will say fundamentally, all of those solutions still mean that you're seeing all of the stuff and that you have to deal with it. You have to filter it, you have to folder it, you have to pay per month for a service to do something better. And what Gated is doing is we're saying you shouldn't have to deal with that in the first place. You should only see the messages that are relevant. So, really, it's a completely new paradigm. No longer
So
do we think everything belongs in the inbox.
one of the reasons I asked that is because I had a guest on this podcast a while back that she ran a $500 million a year jewelry company, um, just like insanely large. And I remember asking her about our e-commerce brand, and one of the things she said to me that stood out, and I think might be useful for you guys because you're like you're right on the edge of that tipping into the scale,
Mhm.
was that the journey from from 0 to $1 million in revenue, and then from 1 million to 10 million in revenue, is a certain set of problems, right?
Mhm.
And mostly it's learning how to grow a business, right? And get the scrappy stuff and all this stuff, and getting your marketing, your messaging, all that stuff right, and figuring out how to deliver for your customers. She's like, oh, that's all like the business stuff that you're ready for. And she's like,
Yeah.
once you pass that $10 million revenue mark, everything changes.
Yeah.
And she goes, it changes into now you're going to start attracting the eyes of your competitors. Like, we're in the candle business. She's like, you guys are under $2 million, nobody cares. But she's like, the candle business is a $10 billion a year industry. And she's like, as soon as you cross $10 million a year, everyone in the candle business is going to look what you're doing and try to copy you. And
Yeah.
she's like, it doesn't matter what business you're in, you hit that $10 million mark, they're all going to try to copy you. She's like, if you don't want to have people be able to copy you, you have to have something you stand for,
Yeah.
right? And she's like, you have to have something that's bigger than your product.
Absolutely.
um, and so, anyways, I was just thinking about that for you guys, is like, that's like your next stage of your marketing, is what does gated stand for?
Yeah. Well, I think,
Yeah.
we're already taking a stand for it, which is, again, I think a lot of even the large, the massive companies, and I'm looking at, email providers,
Yeah,
Um,
like
they
Google,
are,
right?
yeah,
They're huge.
they're built on a paradigm of we should, it's very a Silicon Valley mindset. We should get all the data and then we will take care of all the data. Whereas, we're standing for um, you as a user, as a person, as a human. You should have some control over what reaches you in the first place. And I don't think that's going to be easy to replicate because it's a very human centric versus data centric play. And
Yeah.
I think it will be very interesting to see how things
Yeah,
evolve.
yeah, it's one
We
of the
we
things
already
that
are standing for something early. Like
yeah,
we
you have
have
something you're
very
standing
early.
hardcore for, and I know it reminds me of, that whole, like, if, is you have to know who the customer is,
Yeah.
right? Like, with Google, for instance, the customer is your data, right? Like, it's their advertisers is the customer, and
Yeah.
you're the
If you
product.
don't know if you don't know what the product is, you're the product. That's the
Yeah,
thing
you're
with
the product.
Mhm.
And so just like thinking through where you guys are at, it's like the product you're making sure people know
Mhm.
it's not your data and your stuff that's the product. It's these donations to the nonprofits and getting your time back and those kind of things.
Yeah. You
So
are the customer. You are a human. You are not the product.
yeah, absolutely. And now, a quick word from our show's sponsor. Hey there, fellow podcaster. Having a weekly audio and video show on all the major online networks that builds your brand, creates fame, and drives sales for your business doesn't have to be hard. I know it feels that way because you've tried managing your show internally and realize how resource intensive it can be. You felt the pain of pouring 8 to 10 hours of work into just getting 1 hour of content published and promoted all over the place. You see the drain on your resources, but you do it anyways because you know how powerful it is. Heck, you've probably even tried some of those automated solutions and ended up with stuff that makes your brand look cheesy and cheap. That's not helping grow your business. Don't give up though. The struggle ends now. Introducing Push Button Podcasts, a done-for-you service that will help you get your show out every single week without you lifting a finger after you've pushed that stop record button. We handle everything else: uploading, editing, transcribing, writing, research, graphics, publication, and promotion, all done by real humans who know, understand, and care about your brand almost as much as you do. Empowered by our own proprietary technology, our team will let you get back to doing what you love while we handle the rest. Check us out at pushbuttonpodcast.com/hero for 10% off the lifetime of your service with us and see the power of having an audio and video podcast growing and driving micro celebrity status and business in your niche without you having to lift more than a finger to push that stop record button. Again, that's pushbuttonpodcast.com/hero. See you there. And now, back to the Hero Show. Cool. So I got one more question. Well, actually, two more. This one's about your own personal heroes, right? Every hero has their mentors, just like Frodo had Gandalf, or Luke had Obi-Wan, or even Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, or Spider-Man and Uncle Ben, or in the latest movie Aunt May. Right. So who are some of your heroes? Were they real life mentors, speakers, or authors? Maybe peers who are a couple years ahead of you? How important were they to what you have accomplished so far?
Yeah, I mean, I one quick easy answer that I definitely just want to share is I do think the women in my family are actually one of my main heroes because I think they've always even in the generations before they were necessarily career women. My grandmother, I think of in particular, she was not in a career, but she organized and she lit a fire in everything she did. And so I do think that one of my superheroes is the generations of women in my family that came before me and really set a path that I try to live up to every day. On a more tactical level, my mentor and my boss and my managing director for many years at Google is a man named Rob Torres, and he is an absolute incredible combination of business leadership and someone who cares more about the team beneath him than anything else. And so he was the one who encouraged me to find the balance between my work life and my family. He was the one who validated the importance of family and yet also strengthened my belief that I was really needed in the workplace. I think leaders who really see their teams as individuals and it's their mission to empower those individuals and to help their team grow are some of the most priceless people in the business world. And that's at large companies and at startups. So Rob, for me, has always been a mentor. I think he just approaches work with both a capability, but also an authenticity that I aspire to. There are a lot of loud voices, and that's never really been the people that I look up to. It's the people that really live the way that life should be lived. And he's
Yeah.
definitely one of those people.
I've always liked like I have a small team with our with both the companies. They're not terribly huge. And one of the things I've always strived for as, the entrepreneur who's building those companies is making sure that everyone on my team understands that they're here because of what they bring to the table, right? Their humanity and
Mhm.
their creativity and their skill.
Yeah.
And they're not cogs in our machine, right? They're
Yeah.
people who are bringing their breath of life and creativity to this company, right? And to what we're trying to do. And so I go out of my way to try and find out like where where they want to go, like where they see themselves
Mhm.
in their life and in their business, and how their work for us helps them get there.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the right approach or not, but that's the way I've always tried to tried to grow my teams and my organizations.
I love it. I think one of the things that always grated me more than anything in managers that I maybe didn't get along with, but one thing that managers do that drives me nuts is when they're always pushing you to the next thing. What I really want is a manager who wants to listen to what you want, because at certain times in my life, I just wanted to do my role really well. I didn't want a promotion. I didn't want to go here. I just wanted to do what I was doing and do it really well. And so they say, instead of how can I move you to X, Y, or Z, they say, what can I get you, or what can I remove that's blocking you to help you do what you really want to do? And so I think it's very important what you just said, is to really listen to those people, as opposed to just saying, "Oh yeah, I'm help people move up the ladder." It's not about that. It's about meeting people with what they need and then really empowering them. And for me, that was a move to Alaska, among other things. But when you really give people what they need, that's when you build some serious loyalty, some serious dedication, and the
Yeah.
that ever vague culture term, like that's where it comes from.
Yeah, and it comes from seeing the humanity in the people that are on your team,
That's
right?
right.
Which means their home life and their skills and the stuff that they're looking, what are the things that they're excited about on the weekends, right? I had a guy who was, recovering alcoholic who liked to do RC planes, and like so when he came in after work one day and worked overtime for us, we got him a gift card to his favorite RC shop, kind of thing, like that kind of stuff,
I
right?
love it.
That's you have to, I don't know, I you have to know your people and help them get where they want to go.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. So one last question before we wrap this up, and it's your guiding principles, right? So one of the things that makes heroes heroic is that they live by a code. For
Yeah.
instance, Batman never kills his enemies; he only ever brings them to Arkham Asylum. So as we wrap up the interview, I want to talk about top one, maybe two principles that you regularly use in your life. Maybe something you wish you had known when you started out in your own career.
Yeah. I've developed some thoughts on this very strongly, I would say, in the last 3 to 5 years. And actually, what's funny is, you pointed out earlier, I have some custom artwork on my wall. I have a skull on my wall, which most people would think is creepy. Um, but it fundamentally is a very important reminder. Some people might have heard of memento mori. It's essentially a phrase that it means, remember, we're all going to die. Remember to die.
Yeah.
Now, it sounds super morbid, but really the opposite of that is, when you think about the fact that things end, and think that things come to an end, you so much more cherish what you're doing, and you stop doing the stuff that doesn't matter. So, like, I hate to bring it all back to gated, but that's a lot of what drives me, is really this massive focus. For me, like, a core principle is memento mori, because it is saying, take a real thought about the moments in your day and what you're choosing to do with that moments. Now, I may choose to take a nap on the couch, but I've thought about it, and it's what I really need and what I've decided to do, right? Like, it's not just because I'm lazy or I'm not doing something. So I always say, it doesn't mean I'm doing things all the time and, life is running out and you got to go. No, no. It just means have a much more conscious thought for what you're doing, because then you know that those moments aren't wasted. Right.
Yeah.
It's funny, because some people do just think it's a creepy skull on my wall, but it's not. It's definitely a way to approach every moment in life. And I mean, man, I tell you, we've talked a bunch about kids on this. It goes more than anything. It goes when it comes to your kids and how fast the days go by. So
It reminds me so much of one of the things that dramatically changed my life and career,
mhm.
was if I go back 6 or 7 years ago now and look at my business, I was not living the I'm going to butcher this phrase, was memento mori.
Yeah, memento mori, exactly.
Right. And like I remember thinking on a regular basis, like if I died today, I'm not ready. I'm not ready to die today kind of thing. Because like I've got more things I want to do and I haven't accomplished what I want to accomplish yet. And if you look at how that reflected in my day-to-day life, I was working, anywhere from 12 to 16 hours a day. My business was not making a lot of revenue. I was missing time with my wife and kids, and my business
Yeah.
was, not, it was not, it was like barely paying the bills kind of thing.
Hmm.
And, I read a book called The Ant and the Elephant by Vince Visconti.
Hmm.
And it was a whole idea about, there's an ant that's your conscious mind, and it can control the elephant, which is your
Hmm.
subconscious mind. And one of the things they talked about in there was this concept of how creativity it thrives with boundaries.
Hmm.
And there were some studies done on kids where they'd put them out into a playground that like there was no fences around, and like they've just got the concrete pad, and then there's the big grass area, and with no fences, all the kids would stay on the concrete pad. They
Huh.
would they would never move from the concrete pad. And then as soon as they put the fences up, the kids would explore everything. Right? They would go all the way out to the edges of the fence, and that was just it was just an illustration of the whole concept that creativity thrives with boundaries. Like, and you look at that, everything from painting to photography to videography to anything you do creative wise, you're always looking at, okay, what's the boundaries that you're working within.
Yeah.
And the thing that I got out of it, the thing that I started doing was looking at, why am I not putting boundaries on my time?
Hmm.
And what I think is important, and like really figuring out like where do I want to put stuff in my life.
Right.
And so I started doing things like, instead of working, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, what if I only work 8 hours a day, 6 days a week? What if I work only 8 hours a day, 5 days a week? What if I work 4 hours a day, 4 days a week? And I've gotten to the point now, like, again, 7 years ago, one business was taking 90% of my time and I was missing time with my wife and kids. Now I average 4 hours a day, 4 days a week, and run two companies, both of which are, 8 to 10 times more profitable than what I was doing back then. Right.
Incredible.
And it's because of that concept, the momentum more, to realize that like I have to choose consciously what gets put into my day.
That's
Um,
true, and it's funny how this entire conversation is reflecting that, like, that's what we're building with gated.
yeah,
That's what when you talked about my skill power, that idea of, complexity into focus, and then that's very much what we're talking about, is like the principles we live by. You can't succeed if you're trying to do everything. You can't
yeah,
have focus and think deeply, which there's a great quote from Charles Duhigg on, like, the only killer app in all of history was thinking deeply. It's something like that. I might have
yeah,
misphrased him, but you can't think deeply if everything else is peppering in from the outside, right? And so if you put boundaries down it and say this is going to end, then it allows you to really use that time that you have, the time or the focus, in a much more effective way.
yeah, yeah. And to your point with the whole momentum mora thing, I remember, it's something I was just thinking about the other day, talking with my wife about it. I was like, I have no desire to die today. Right? I've
No,
got lots of things I still want to do, but if I compare where I'm at now to where I was 6 years ago, if I died today, I would die happy.
interesting.
Right?
Yeah. Well, and
um,
that yeah, I could go deep on this. There's other thinking around it too, which is, yeah, I won't go too far into it, but there's the other thing, which is literally every single day we're dying. You're losing the
yeah,
time. It's gone.
yeah,
So if
it's
you
gone.
don't do that, there you go. Um, yeah,
And yeah, there's nothing that shows you that more, at least not in my life, is watching my kids grow up. My son just came in, he's working on his schoolwork in the other room. He's 12 years old, and I swear yesterday he was 2.
yeah,
But it's
yeah,
it's crazy watching them grow up, and then at the same time, like watching my parents grow up as well. And to be in that middle generation it's very you become very aware how short life is very quickly.
very
Uh,
much so. I feel
and
like
this
we've just created two spin-off. You've got a new philosophy podcast and you've got a new parenting podcast.
yeah, probably. And man, I don't know what it is, but this last year I've had like, I don't know, a whole handful of friends that we've celebrated 40th birthdays for. I'm like, I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready for 40th birthdays.
Oh,
So
you are. It's going to be great.
cool. Well, that is basically a wrap on our interview. I think that's a good place for us to end up. But I do finish every interview with a simple challenge that I call the Heroes Challenge, which I think might be how you ended up here. And we do this to help get access to stories that we might not find on our own. So, question is simple: do you have someone in your life or in your network that you think has a cool entrepreneurial story? Who are they? First names are fine. And why do you think they come share their story with us here on the Hero Show? First person that comes to mind for you.
Oh, that's a really good question. The person that comes to mind because I saw her make the leap from a large company. She was at Google with me. She and I actually went to college together, and then we're at Google together. But she made the leap to an entrepreneurial journey quite a few years before I did, and I was always looking at her and going, "Wow, like that looks so great. How are you doing that? Oh, tell me about everything you're learning." Um, her name is Kelly, and she's founded her own agency. They do. Um, like media and digital strategy. But she's found a way, kind of like we've been talking about, to grow an incredible business simply with her hard work and her smarts and to balance her life with it. She works remotely out of Bozeman, Montana, and has built an incredible company. So, yeah, Kelly is definitely a hero story that probably was part of the kick in the pants that got me to jump from big company to small.
Cool. We'll reach out after the interview and see if we can get an introduction to her. They don't always say yes, but when they do, we get some cool stories here on the show.
Yeah.
So in comic books, there's always the crowd of people at the end who are cheering and clapping for their acts of heroism. So as we close, our analogous to that is, where can people find you if they want your help, if they want to gate their email? Where can they light up the bat signal, so to speak, and say, hey, Melissa, I would
Mhm.
like to get your help and focus my life. So I think, and then more importantly than where, is who are the right types of people to reach out and actually do that?
Oh, cool. Well, this one's fun because since my email is gated, I'm more than happy to share it as broadly as we want. Anyone can reach me at melissa@gated.com. That's gated is spelled GATED. And then the website for gated is at gated.com. So you can learn more about what it is and how it works if you're excited about that. I'm also on LinkedIn, but email is usually the best way to reach me. And who are the people that should reach out? Really, if you're one of those people where you've got things to do with your day and you have something you're driving toward, you have something you want to accomplish, but you're just feeling that constant pain of, oh my gosh, there's so much digital noise coming in, especially to my inbox. Um, those are exactly the people that I want to talk with. More specifically, it's overwhelmed marketers, it's busy executives. This is a tool that is free and it's insanely easy to get started, and it's going to help you actually do all those great things that you're already working hard to do. So, yeah, any of those folks can definitely ring me anytime.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing your story and the story of Gated. It has been a fascinating conversation. I appreciate all the time we got to spend together. Do you have any final words of wisdom for my audience before we hit this stop record button?
Oh, no, thanks. It's been a real pleasure. And I really appreciate how we were able to talk about, the business that I'm building, but also the person that I am and the things that both of us really hold dear. I think it's wonderful to have such a good, authentic conversation. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.